Megan, let's begin with you on this Congress issue. If Mike Johnson says, all right, I stick with the deal, does he stick with the Speaker's gavel?
You know, it's beginning to feel a lot like October around here. This is all very eerily familiar to what we saw happen to his predecessor, Kevin McCarthy, who was the first speaker ever ousted by his own party on a vote on the floor. We could very well see this happen again. We already have two ultra-conservatives, Chip Roy and Marjorie Taylor Greene, threatening to do just that. And they only need 4 now because we have this incredibly shrinking majority. So due to retirements and whatnot, it's 4 votes. So he's already halfway there if all Democrats unite like they did with McCarthy to oust him.
Well, so what's the likely scenario here? If we have a re-agreement that we're celebrating and the fact that we're standing by a deal that was made back in June, actually, it sounds like he wants to avoid a shutdown. Can he actually touch that hot button CR that could trigger a motion to vacate?
So, yes, he could. I think he was really between a rock and a hard place here. If he had, given in to the hardliners in his party and reneged on that agreement that he had with Senator Schumer and with Democrats, he would have really been handcuffed going forward. So whether or not he kept the speakership, he would essentially be a speaker in name only, which was exactly the same calculation that Kevin McCarthy made just 3 or 4 months ago.
It's interesting how history repeats itself. Same with kicking the can down the road with these stopgap measures. Do we have an idea if there was a CR of what duration are we talking? Because something like a year has been floated.
Yes. So right now they're talking end of February, beginning of March, just enough time to kind of get these bills through both chambers and get them to the president's desk. If they were to go into April, then they risk triggering this 1% across the board cut to federal spending. And that's a 1% cut to last year's numbers, which is much lower than a lot of spending that most agencies had expected. So actually the hardliners would be happy with a year-long CR because it would essentially amount to a pretty significant budget cut in order of what they had been hoping for.
Of course, Republicans on the Armed Services Committee are not too comfortable with that when you think about defense spending essentially being frozen. Our thanks to Megan Scully as we turn now to the Middle East and Houthi rebels vowing to target U.S. and U.K. commercial vessels just a day after the Allies launched airstrikes against the group in Yemen. We turn to Bloomberg's Dan Flately for more on this. Dan, thanks for joining. As we're learning today from the Pentagon, the scale of this mission was even larger than we may have first thought, with an excess of 80 cruise missiles deployed. Is the U.S. preparing for a response?
Yes, absolutely. The Pentagon has been asked about a potential response, and they are expecting one potentially and are certainly preparing for it. The strikes that you mentioned, Joe, about more than 60 targets with about 30 locations, and specifically focused on elements that the Houthis have used to attack ships in the Red Sea, or at least that the Pentagon is alleging that they've used to attack ships in the Red Sea. So the focus is really on trying to get that sort of behavior to stop without sparking a wider conflict.
Yeah, they targeted things like airports or storage facilities, even launch facilities potentially for missiles and the like. Of course, all of this was conducted by the U.S. while the Secretary of Defense remains in the hospital at Walter Reed.
Yes.
How difficult is this moment for the U.S. military to be engaging in this kind of behavior in the Middle East, knowing it could potentially be escalatory, while the SecDef is not as fully in commission as maybe he would be otherwise?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, it came up on a call earlier today with the Pentagon, and they basically said that the Secretary of Defense was, commanding and overseeing these attacks from his hospital room at Walter Reed. I think the question is more one of chain of command. So if something were to happen with Austin again, or there were some interruption, heaven forbid that he were to, have other complications, who then steps in? There is the line of succession in place, and who tells the president? Because this time somebody's got to tell the president. They made that mistake once, and I don't think they're going to do that.
Is he calling shots? Is he directing operations from a hospital bed or authorizing plans that are put before him?
Well, according to what the Pentagon has said, the plans were basically put into place, or they were working on them after this complex attack on Tuesday by the Houthis on shipping in the Red Sea. The Secretary of Defense did authorize the attacks and told the CENTCOM commander to go ahead with the attacks. So he did sign off on them and he did authorize them. Mm-hmm. They were coordinated, obviously, with the National Security Council and the White House. And as to who ultimately made that call, really, it lands at the president's feet. So this is something that he will have to claim, take responsibility for one way or the other.
So coordination between the NSC, the White House, and the Pentagon, even if it didn't necessarily happen as quickly with the actual hospitalization itself of Lloyd Austin and getting that message across. Bloomberg's Dan Flately, thank you so much for joining us. And now, speaking of other elements of the world, let's move across to the election in Taiwan. Bloomberg Markets Asia co-anchor Yvonne Man is joining us now from there. There is a very important vote happening Saturday. It already is Saturday in that region. Just what is at stake, Yvonne, in this election?
Well, the implications globally are huge, Kailey. As you mentioned, polls are opening in less than 2 hours' time. Keep in mind, right, that this is a three-party race. And it just go, it's a tight one. You take a look at how these campaign rallies last night, just before the eve of this election played out. My colleague Stephen Ingle says, Taiwan is democracy on steroids. These campaign rallies are like rock concerts, and we saw them come out in droves, hundreds of thousands. And in fact, even surprising to the upside was the TPP, the newcomer third party, where we saw 300,000 people show up. More than what we saw with the ruling party, DPP, and more from the main opposition party, KMT itself. So a lot is at stake here. You talk about the choice is between whether Taiwan voters want a future that is closer with China or one that preserves its autonomy here. And the latter is what the DPP incumbent party is hoping is what's going to drive voters to the polls that open later on today. After 8 years under President Tsai Ing-wen's rule, she steps down this year because of term limits. And of course, the DPP is the more independence-minded party. And what Beijing has seen as separatists, right? That's what they've called President Tsai Ing-wen, also the vice president and presidential candidate Lai Ching-te. So a third term from under the DPP would be unprecedented here in Taiwan and deliver a blow to President Xi, who has said Taiwan's reunification with China is inevitable, and they'll do so by whatever means necessary.
Well, so if the DPP remains in power, what will be the response from Beijing, Yvonne?
Yeah, so we have seen some signs of Beijing trying to interfere into this election days before this vote, right? So if softer forms like Chinese balloons that have flown over the island. We've seen military aircraft passing the median line of the Taiwan Strait. Other forms of economic pressure as well, tariffs as well social sort of interference on some of these platforms in China. So this is all nothing new in the eyes of Taiwanese voters and unlikely to really change the outcome of this election. But we have heard from Taiwanese officials that saying they don't expect Beijing to carry out big military drills immediately after this election. The weather is one thing. The PLA unlikely to hold big exercises in the winter. But come maybe spring, Beijing may start to ramp up some of the pressure here, whether it's military or economic measures, once the weather is better and just before the president takes office in May.